Hey everyone, George here. Welcome back to the channel. So you've had your tank set up for the time that it takes to cycle it, your fish are all in the tank, everything's going along great, and all of a sudden out of nowhere you see this brown diatribe algae that is very common in most new tanks. And I'm going to talk to you today about what you can do, several things that you can do to eradicate that problem, because it just takes away from the beauty of your tank, and we don't want that stuff around. And there's ways to prevent it, there's ways to eradicate it if you do have a problem with it, and then there's also ways that you can just have it not happen naturally by making sure that the system that you have set up in your tank is adequate for what you're trying to do, and that generally takes care of it. So I'm going to talk about some natural ways of eradicating that algae, and I'm going to talk to you about some more hands-on ways to get rid of it as well. So let's get to it and talk about that right now. Hey everyone, George here. Welcome back to the channel. So one of the biggest questions I get in my comments is, how do you remove algae from leaves once it's established itself? The most common algae is the diatribe algae, which is the brown algae that is usually caused by a lighting issue of some kind. It's usually too much light. So a lot of the plants in your tank, you have to understand, they're going to respond to the type of lighting that you have established in that aquarium, and if it's off in some way or another, it's going to create a problem with different kinds of algae. Now, the first thing that I would tell you is, if you're getting the brown diatribe kind of algae that is very common after a cycle, your tank is reasonably new, has been through the cycle, but is reasonably new, and not a tank that, let's just throw a number out there, say your tank is less than a year old or less than 8 months old, to narrow it down a little bit further. You can see some of this develop on your leaves of some of your plants, like your anubias plants and things like that. Now, I use mostly low to moderate light plants just because I like the look. I'm not really into exotic plants. I'm really not into a lot of ground cover type plants. I have done some of that, and I do have some tanks, as you've seen in some of my videos, where there is repens in there that I do have to trim down every once in a while, and I feel like I'm talking to the deaf here. I don't know why I did that, but anyway, long story short, is there's a simple solution to getting rid of that. The first thing you want to do, of course, is to identify the problem. And identifying the problem is 99% of the time lighting issues that just need to be taken care of. It's as simple as just figuring out the kind of light that you're using, and most of the time it's too much light for the plant itself. So what we do to reduce the light is we can do a couple of different things. Number one, you can change the whole light system that you have altogether. Second thing that you can do is, if your light has the ability, if it's an LED light, it may or may not, depending on how it's built, but you may be able to put some kind of a dimmer on it, which gives you the ability to control the kind of light that you're getting. Now, the third thing is, you may have windows, which I do right behind this camera here. I have a window that comes in onto this particular part of my office area. Yes, I have a drink over here. That's okay. We can do that. We're on lockdown, and we can do that. But anyway, long story short, if you do have lights in the room that are affecting the look of the tank, because there's a lot of light coming in. I didn't mean the look of the tank. Why am I saying that? That's not what I meant. No, a lot of people would correct that part of the video and cut it out and whatever. I don't do that. I as much as I can prevent editing, I do. If I say something wrong, I just correct myself. So if you see me doing that, excuse me for doing it. That's just the way I do things. But what I'm trying to say is, if light is coming in from a window like this window behind the camera here and coming in directly on this, it's going to affect not just the light that you're using here, which is perfect for this setup and the kind of plants that I have in here, but because I have that light coming in from up there, that's going to throw it off a little bit, and it can create an environment where you get some algae growth that may or may not be a problem. Now, every tank, after it cycles, goes through that process of going through that brown algae that we all see on the plants, and that is just typically part of the longer term cycling of your tank. It doesn't mean that you're going to have this problem all the time. There's 3 things you can do to get rid of it, and I'm going to tell you those 3 things, and I'm actually going to demonstrate actually one of them as well. First thing you need to do is get some invertebrates in there, such as shrimp, some snails, and I can't remember what the 3rd thing was in the invertebrate area, but if you can get some of those in there, shrimp and snails, and make sure you get the right kind of snails. You don't want snails that are going to actually eat your plants. You want snails that are going to go across the surface of your plant and eat up anything that's on there, because that's their food source. They love algae, so they're going to go for that. Shrimp do the same thing. They will keep your tank pristine if you can keep them alive in there and big enough so that they don't get eaten by the fish that are in your tank, etc. So those are the natural ways to do that. Now, the 3rd natural way in that group of 3 things that I said that you could do is to get some autocinclids or some other kinds of algae eaters that will benefit your tank. Now, if you're going to get autocinclids in a 20-gallon cube like this one, you're probably talking about, I would put a minimum of 3 in there. They don't like to be alone, number 1. 2 is okay. I've got several small nano tanks with 2 in there, and they've done well. They've been in there for a very long time and are very healthy. And 3 is actually optimal for a 20-gallon. So 3 to 5 in a 20-gallon would be actually perfect, because they're a cleaning crew. That's basically what they do. They go around and they clean as much algae as they possibly can off the leaves, because it's their main food source. I don't get a lot of algae problems, but when I see a little bit of that brown algae pop up in there, the autocinclids will typically take care of that, or the snails and or shrimp, if you can keep shrimp in that particular tank. Now, with fish this size right here, your little cherry shrimp or your blue velvets and stuff like that aren't going to do very well, because they're going to get picked on, or the fish are going to try to eat them. So you're not going to be able to really keep those in this kind of a tank. You can get some larger shrimp, and there's several varieties out there that are not real attractive, but they're great cleanup crews, and if that's what you're wanting them for, that's great. Now, they may mess up the look of your tank, and that may bother you, and so you've got to go to these other alternatives: autocinclids, snails, and shrimp if you can do it. So anyway, the second thing that you can do is actually periodically go in and clean the leaves of your plants. Now, I know that sounds like a daunting task, but it's really not. Now, I don't have any... I dropped this, I apologize. I'm going to fix this right away here, put that back. So, I don't have any issues with algae in here, but just as a way of showing you how you would take care of this problem, I am going to sort of demonstrate the best way that I can tell you to clean off your leaves of plants like Anubias, any broadleaf plant, your swords, your Anubias, even some crypts. As long as the crypts are not really delicate, you can do this. And the first tool, and maybe only tool that you need, is this guy right here, a toothbrush. Now, a toothbrush sounds like it's rough and whatever. The first thing you want to do is you want to start out with a toothbrush that is a soft bristle toothbrush to begin with. And what you want to do at that point is get it even softer, because what you don't want to do is scrub on those leaves, and we're going to do this in a minute, to the point where you're bruising the leaves or creating a problem that damages them, tears them, whatever. Now, Anubias and swords are pretty hardy in the sense that they can take a little bit of that, but you still have to be extremely careful and delicate, because we're only wiping off the surface of them. We don't need to be really harsh when we're rubbing on the top of the plants. It's just enough to get that plant back to its normal state. That algae will go away within a few weeks just by the autocinclids or other types of algae eater fish that you might have in there, or snails, or like I said, if you are able to keep shrimp in a tank like this, which obviously for reasons that we mentioned earlier, I can't do that. Those three things are probably going to take care of the algae on their own. But if you can't do any of that, or say the autocinclids are just not doing the job, sometimes autocinclids, they get enough of the food that's on the very bottom of the tank that if you're overfeeding or whatever, that they don't bother cleaning the plants. So it's kind of hard to keep that balance, because you want to feed your fish correctly, but you don't want to feed them so much that you end up with a lot of food at the bottom that the autos are going to come around and eat and not do the rest of their job of cleaning your tank and your algae problems up because they're full. When you do buy autocinclids, one of the things I want to tell you, and Siamese algae eaters, I have one in here. I'm not a big fan of Siamese algae eaters because of their personalities. They are quite aggressive sometimes with some of the fish in your tank. If they don't like a certain fish, or they find a fish sort of being territorial with them, and they feel like they can pick on it, they're going to do that, and sometimes that ends in not such great things. So, and I don't mean for the Siamese algae eater, I mean for the fish that the algae eater is going after. But, these are all great natural ways to do it. But like I said, if all else fails, this toothbrush right here, as long as these bristles, these are really soft. You couldn't hurt the plants unless you really scrubbed really hard, which we're not going to do. The idea is to be delicate and get the job done without creating an issue of tearing your leaves on your plants and so forth. Now, like I said, I don't have anything in here that needs cleaning because I just don't have that issue. The lighting is perfect. Even with the window behind me, I'm not getting any problems like that. But if we are going to do this with the toothbrush, like I said, we need to be extremely delicate, and we're going to take a second and come back, and I'm going to show you how that's done without damaging the plants. So I'll be right back, and we'll go to showing you a little bit more about how that's done, and stay with me. Back everyone, and so now I'm going to show you how to clean these leaves off without creating a huge problem. Now, watch your water level, because you got to stick your hands down into the tank. Make sure you wash your hands really well, especially when we're in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic here, and we're using a lot of gels and things like that in our hands. That is a quick way to put toxins in your tank and really do some serious damage to your fish. So you want to make sure that your hands are really, really clean. My recommendation is to just wash them with soap and water and hot water if you can, as much as you can stand, and really rinse them really well so there's no residue even from the soap on there, because any kind of cleaners or detergents are really tough on fish They don't like it. So just be careful with that, but do make sure your hands are clean of any kind of toxins that are going to get into your fish tank. And that's just like, a couple of less than a minute wash should take care of that problem. So now what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to look at these top plants that are right in this area here, the ones closest to the light. They're the most likely candidates for the problem that we're talking about. Now, like I said, I don't see any algae on any of these, so for just demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you basically how to do this. Now, the first thing you want to do is put one hand underneath the plant to support it. You don't want to try to clean the plant off, and scrub it without any support underneath it, because what you're going to do is you're going to break the plant's center column, and that's just going to cause the leaf to die. It's not going to cause the whole plant to die, but you're going to destroy a leaf. And these leaves grow so slowly that you really don't want to do that, because you're just going to create an issue where your tank just doesn't look near as nice. So I'm just going to pick any random leaf in here. I'm going to stick my hands in. I hope you can see this as best you can. And I'm supporting it. And what I'm doing is I'm going very, very gently over the top of that leaf. And I'm not creating any type of a situation where I'm putting a lot of pressure on it, and I'm not scrubbing hard. That brown algae will come off really easily if you just scrub it very, very lightly. Now, other plants such as ferns over here and that sort of thing, you may see some of this brown algae on the tips. In fact, I see a little on this. The best way to get rid of that is to just let it have some time, and your auto sink lids will eventually, if you're not overfeeding them, take care of that. But what you can do is you can just kind of comb them like you'd be combing hair, and it pretty much does the same thing without hurting the plant. And I can see just by doing that that little bit of brown algae that I noticed on there is actually just brushing right off. And it's just mainly on the tips. If you look at your different kinds of ferns that are in your tank, you're going to notice that most of them are easily cleaned. And we have a different type of anubias right here. It's more of a longleaf type. Same thing, support it with your hand and go in there and just scrub on it a little bit. And you're going to make a little bit of a mess. That's just going to happen. That's why you keep a towel on hand, but you're going to make a little bit of a mess. And that's pretty much it. Now, the other thing that you want to do is if you see that same situation on top of stones, take your toothbrush and basically just scrub the top of the stones, and that will really take care of the problem. Again, a soft bristle toothbrush, you don't need anything harsh. There's nothing in here that is stuck on here. If you're doing good maintenance, you're not going to have algae issues anyway. And that, when I say that, what I'm really talking about is water changes. It's so important that we do these water changes, and this is one of the reasons why, is because we want to keep that algae issue at bay, and the way that we do that is keeping the water clean. One of the contributors to algae is not just light, it is overfeeding sometimes, and overfeeding just allows your bioload to get over where it needs to be, and that, with combination of light, creates an environment for that brown algae to grow. So I hope that I've been helpful. I didn't spend a lot of time on this, but I think I've given you enough information to help you with any algae issues that you might have. Now, if you do have problems with, say, hair algae and things like that, there's a couple of different processes you can do. If you have any questions on that, you can leave me a comment, and I'll be glad to get back to you with some information that will tell you exactly how to deal with that particular issue as well. Now, I do normally have a top on this tank because fish do jump, and I'm not, many of the videos that you see out there with George Farmer or Green Aqua and places like that, there's no lids on their aquariums and the fish are running around. I guarantee you that that is for filming purposes only, because fish do jump and you're going to lose fish that way. So I have a lid, and I'll get that for you right now. It's basically just a piece of plexiglass. If it doesn't come with them, many of these tanks come with their own lids, but if they don't, have someone, your hardware store will cut this exactly the size that you want it. It's going to be really hard for you to cut it at home. You can do it, but it is harder to do. And basically this just sets right on top like this. It's an exact fit for this tank. Put your light back down, and voila, your tank is back to where it's supposed to be. So do your water changes, man, and be careful with light, because there's a lot of information out there on how lighting affects algae, and we all know this. This is some of the basics in aquarium keeping, and that light can be a real issue if we're not paying attention to the type of plants that we have in the tank, the ones that we've chosen for our particular aquarium and what we're trying to achieve. If you don't do the research on the light, you're going to get algae problems. And then the second most important thing is doing those water changes. Now, I have tanks in the house here where I don't have to do a water change any more than a quarter once a week, but every single tank in my home, and I have a lot of them, get a quarter water change once a week at a minimum, and that's every single tank. And I just have them on a schedule where I do it. And with a tank like this that's fairly new, it's been cycled for quite some time, and fish have been in here for a while, but it's fairly new. But I've been doing about a quarter water change every 3 days, and probably I'll do that another couple of months just to make sure that there's no algae issues cropping up and that the tank is in pristine shape. A lot of people say, well, when you do too many water changes, you're killing the bacteria, excuse me, not the bio, but the bacteria that's good for your tank, and you're not giving it a chance to establish itself to take care of that problem. Well, if you do a quarter water change a couple of times a week, I used to do half, and I just recently switched that up because I found that it wasn't necessary to do half a water change on a tank like this. And a quarter water change, if you've got 1 or 2 tanks in your house, it takes you about 15-20 minutes per tank. If you don't have that amount of time, a couple of times a week, then you probably shouldn't even be in the hobby, because you really need to do that in order to keep these pristine like this. Every one of my tanks, this is a tank that's been here for almost 2 years. There's nothing in there that has changed other than the fact that I trim the plants once in a while, and I take the cuttings and I put them right back into the tank. Now, I did notice that there is some algae issues on a couple of these leaves, and we are going to talk about that a little bit more in a future video that I'll explain a little bit more in depth on how hair algae or blackbeard algae or some of those things can be taken care of. If you're getting blackbeard algae in your tank, then you've got a real problem with chemical imbalance of some kind or another, or something is not right with your tank. That stuff is one of the biggest indicators that you've got a lot of things off in your tank, and I firmly believe that you can clean that stuff as much as you want, but it's going to come back over a period of time. It's easier to figure out what your chemical imbalance is, and your lighting and all the things that go together to make the tank work. than it is to keep cleaning this stuff off all the time. And there aren't too many fish out there that you can buy that are going to go after black-bearded algae and eradicate it from your tank. Once it gets established in there, it's usually limited to a certain area, but it is hard to get rid of and keep it gone permanently. So you might as well do your homework and figure out what's wrong with your tank rather than keep going in and continuing to clean this stuff off, because it becomes a real pain. And anyways, George here with the Art of Water. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Please leave me comments. Any comments that you leave me regarding other types of algae and how to get rid of them, I'm going to be more than happy to answer your questions on that. And I will for sure get back to you as best I can and with as much information as I can to help you solve that problem. Anyways, thanks for watching today, and we'll talk again soon.